Good evening.
Hi. I was in another meeting. Hi, Dale. Hi, Lauren.
I guess you have to accept that the meeting is being recorded before you can unmute and start video. I didn't realize that. Sorry, Marianne, would you mind giving me co-host responsibilities too, so I can help manage things a little bit? Thank you. Okay, I'm sure many people are rushing here from the previous meeting that was still in progress. What do we have here? Who are we missing? We are missing Molly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, I'm missing Molly. Did you hear from Molly?
Yes. She said she'd be just a few minutes late. So if she's the only person we're missing.
Yep. She is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Penny here?
Hmm?
Is Penny here?
Yes,
Yes. Okay.
Penny's here.
Okay.
Okay, so just for future reference, if anybody is going to miss a meeting or has trouble getting to the meeting on time, etc., just let either Marianne or myself know, and we can adjust accordingly. Okay, so we are at 7:01. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And I will take, oh, there's Molly just saying, sorry, she's going to be running late. Okay. Do we have any questions from the public? Now is the time that we like to take questions. If anybody has anything, wants to discuss something. Give you a few minutes. Okay, seeing none, let's go to some housekeeping. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
I move we approve the minutes from the last meeting. That's Brad.
Okay, Brad, and they're the meetings from 2/14.
Yes.
And do I hear a second?
Second, Stephen.
Okay, are there any changes or corrections? Once again, Penny, these are some really good minutes and I appreciate your taking them. Are there any changes or corrections beyond what was already sent to her? Okay, hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. Marianne?
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
Brad?
Aye.
Dale?
I will abstain. I wasn't at the last meeting.
Okay. Penny?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And I am an aye also, Elaine. They were not unanimous, but they were approved. Okay. Moving on. Let's see, I'm still looking at public comment, review the minutes. I want to wait for Molly to get here before we jump into the design decisions. What I would like to talk about a little bit is the fact that these are preliminary designs that we're talking about. Everything is so preliminary. that we're discussing here and that we're site plans that we're looking at. And I want people to keep that in mind, that nothing is in stone yet, and we have not put a shovel to the ground yet or signed off on anything yet. And so everything is fluid. I think when we get to the point where we are looking at some finalizing of project, we will definitely involve the community. So I would love people to keep that in mind as we move forward. Okay. Well, how about if we looked at, I'm still waiting for her. I'd like to wait to continue our design discussion. So are there any committee liaison updates?
I don't have anything.
Mary Ann, do you have anything from the trustees?
Do I have anything from the trustees? No. No. How about if I talk about what the Friends of the, well, let's see what the Friends of the Library are up to. Tuesday, April 4th is Library Giving Day. So that is their next kind of online giving day. And last year on Library Giving Day, the Friends raised $38,000. And the Friends have big plans for Library Giving Day this year, and there'll be more information coming out about that. And the other thing the Friends are starting to plan are spring spruce ups. And so you'll all remember that spring spruce ups are when a team of 4 library loving adults, I'm reading it from the poster, go out and do an hour of yard work for a donation to the new library fund. And spring spruce ups are scheduled from April 15th until about May 8th, any day of the week. And teams are forming now. Email Susie Mosier with your availability. Okay.
And
so
Mary,
Miriam,
may I add to that, that in particular, Susie is looking for more people to help with the spruce up, even more so than people to have their yard spruced up, just to be clear.
Okay.
Workers, specifically rakers.
Specifically rakers. So ask a friend. If you can't do it, ask a friend who might.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any other liaison updates? I think we're kind of slow on our liaison updates, but they might be coming as we move along. Well, I think we're just going to jump into it. It's 7:07. I don't want to waste people's time. So let's jump into our continued design discussion. Matt, I see you're here. And oh, there's Molly. Perfect timing, Molly. Absolutely perfect. We were just getting through with all the other stuff. So the last time we were together, Matt, you put a design out there and actually put in orange or red. I do not remember exactly what the color was, what the siting of the library would be. And I would like everybody who is not part of this committee to really understand that this is preliminary, and that, there's going to be a lot that's going to change as we go through this process. I hope nothing dramatic, but things will change. And so if anybody has any issues with what we're doing right now, I would love to have them come and either talk to us or go to the library building committee email and let us know about that, because I would like to avoid adding extra costs by going through attorneys. If people could be aware of the cost of what it takes to even ask one question through an attorney. So if you could spread the word, everyone, that we are open. We're open every time we meet to discuss people's questions. I would really appreciate that. Okay, saying that, I know I'm preaching to the choir here for most of you, but I just want to keep that in mind. So Matt, what do we have?
Marianne, can you also make me a co-host, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we do have some design updates. I wanted to just give a quick contract update because we spent a pretty good bit of time in our last meeting talking about that. And a final draft went through today. It sounds like your attorney was comfortable with the added language that we discussed a couple weeks ago related to the budget. And so it sounds like that is hopefully all sorted. Becky got a copy. She was going to hopefully get it in front of the select board tonight. So I don't know if that happened, but it sounds like we're very close to having an executed contract, which is great.
Yes, I don't think they're meeting concurrently with us still now, and I don't think that happened before we left for our meeting.
Okay. So with that, I'm gonna share my screen and jump right in. And Elaine, I had planned to preface our presentation tonight with the same kind of heavy qualification that you just made. And the diagram that you referenced, which was a site plan that had, and let's just jump right to it, actually. So what we shared with you last week was this was from 12 years ago, the mapped extent of the wetlands in 2000. This was in 2009 or 2010. And a design was put forth at that time for the grant that stayed outside of that wetland. And the diagram that you're referring to was this one, which we talked about last week, which shows now the significantly expanded limit of wetlands and now a new 100-foot wetland buffer. And all this diagram was trying to say was it's not a proposal, it's not a design. It was just saying that in order to locate the building outside the wetland buffer, which had always been our intention, back a number of years ago, it now has to move considerably further back on the site in order to do that. So whereas previously we would have been able to locate a building 170 feet from the road, now we're about almost 350 feet away to stay fully out of that buffer. That's really the purpose of this slide, nothing more. It's, as I said, it's not a proposal.
Can I ask a question here?
Sure.
Where it says, because I'm not sure where we are on the site, to be honest with you. Where it says grant design footprint, is that big clump of pine trees that's kind of in the middle of the site? Is that where that is?
That is.
Okay.
So it's just, I don't know if you can make, can you see my cursor, by the way?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can, okay. So this is the roof of the garage that was taken down right here,
Okay,
if you can
that
make
helps.
that out.
Okay.
So the grant design footprint was just to the west of that. But that gives you a general sense. If you have a good memory of the site, that sort of tells you how far back we were on the site at that point. And we're now, potentially twice as far back as that. So we're this, I don't know if you can make out this white line, but this is tracing the outline of the woods, at least as far as this aerial is concerned. And I have no idea when this aerial photograph was taken and how accurate it is. And that's one of the things we're going to be asking for an update on the survey is an edge of woodland. But you can see that, in this location, a building footprint would be up against or even into the beginning of that wooded edge at the back of the meadow.
Okay.
So
you.
the things that we're going to show tonight are site diagrams that, and again, I wouldn't even go so far as to call them designs, because they're not yet. Design is a very iterative process. This is the kind of thing where we do a lot of thinking, and the way we think is we put stuff on paper and we look at it and we compare it with other things, and we talk to our consultants about it and with our clients about it. And it's a way for us to sort of test ideas. It doesn't mean all the ideas are good or all of them are going to work for us. But it's a way to kind of get things out on paper so we understand what the issues are that we need to solve and what the components are to a project. And so as I move into this next diagram, so this now is a site diagram that has a slightly different shape. And now this is a shape that is related to a building diagram layout that we've done. So this is to scale on the site, and it's representative of the footprint of a building that could contain all of the program elements that you guys have in your building program. In addition to that building, we also know that we need to accommodate a raised septic system. And I say raised because we think that due to the high water table, we're going to have to do a mounded septic. We don't think that we're going to have a conventional septic that's level with ground. It's going to be mounded up by 2 to 3 feet, probably on top of natural grade. And so I mention that because typically a septic system is kind of invisible, the leaching field. You know, you might see a vent, but you don't necessarily know exactly where the leaching field is. In this case, because it's going to be raised, it actually has, it's more visible. It needs to be considered as it relates to its proximity to the building, its relationship to the building and building grade. And it's big. It's, you know, we think it's going to be about 5,000 square feet for a building of this size. And so what you see here outlined in this white dashed line is, again, to scale, a representation of a raised septic leaching field. We also have parking, a driveway, and some type of turnaround to get back out off the property. And so as we think about those things, the parking, septic, and building, in an ideal world, we would put all of that stuff outside the wetland buffer and keep the wetland buffers as clear as possible. That's, I think, our initial instinct. And we've done a lot of work in other communities where we've had similar wetland sites, and so that's something we take seriously, and we are mindful of the decisions that we make and how that impacts this site. And so if we think, okay, the area that is outside the buffer, which is everything kind of outside this yellow dashed line, right? This darker green, which right now is mostly wooded. But that's where ideally we would locate things like the septic system, the parking lot, because runoff from parking lot is not particularly clean. We want to make sure that it's captured and treated before it is released. Septic system, we haven't had a conversation with Conservation Commission, so I don't know, frankly, what their position is about leaching field in a wetland buffer, but we're going for now with the assumption that it might be better to keep it out of the buffer. And so there are a lot of things that are competing for that real estate. And of those 3 components, septic, parking, and building, the building is actually, we think, probably in a way the least imposing in the wetland buffer. And I say that because we have a little bit of control over how we deal with roof runoff. And I'll come back to that in a minute, but just for the moment, this is, as I said, a kind of diagram where we've sort of thrown things onto the paper to get a sense of how big they are and where we think they are going to need to be. Not that this arrangement is resolved or is set in any way. So if we go to the building diagram, then this is the planning diagram, the program diagram that goes with that site plan. This is it's a 1-story building, organized in a way that has all of the collection spaces, children, teens, adults, all kind of grouped into one large volume. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Really creating one big open volume that has all of those things. And then creating separation between them, either with furniture and bookcases, maybe a couple of partitions strategically located. This gray block here is even hinting at, what if we introduced a fireplace potentially that could serve as a kind of divider from one space to another. But the idea is that all of the collection space is in one big kind of open volume. Entry is from the east end of this building. So this is oriented east-west with the north side facing Leverett Road and the south side facing the woods in the back of the property, which is to the left. So north is to the right. Entering from the east under a covered porch. So this is all one big roof over this entire footprint. Into a porch, then you enter the building here through an entry vestibule and into a lobby. So at that point, you're roughly in the middle of the building. You go into the building, you're greeted by a circulation desk, which is supported by a staff workroom, director's office. To your left, sort of back behind you, is a meeting room, public restrooms, support for the meeting room. And then straight ahead of you is that large kind of library collection space. Off hours, there would be some way to close off the kind of backside of the lobby. So the eastern end of the building would be available to you off hours. You'd use the same front door, come into the same lobby and access the meeting room. One of the things that came up in the last meeting was an interest in having the meeting room accessible when it's not being used for meetings, but just have it not unlike the Wendell Library, where it's set up with furniture and it's available during library hours for, or as a reading room or quiet study room or something. And so having an easy way to get from adults, primarily adult, it sounded like, program to the meeting room is important. And this is not an unreasonable connection. It's not the best connection. You're coming sort of around the circ desk. And so we wanted to look at an option where there was a more direct path. So you have a clear sight line from the main reading room straight down through browsing and lobby and into the meeting room. So they're not right next to each other, but if you're here, you can very clearly see down the length of that access into that room and see that space and see that it's available. But that comes with, in this case, a split between circulation and staff workroom. And so that's, Marianne, a question for you about, and Lauren too, about how important it is to have the staff workroom directly behind the circ desk. I mean, that is traditionally the relationship that we see, but we've seen examples where they're also decoupled a little bit. And this is such a small building that we thought it might be able to support that kind of approach. The advantage of this, as I said, is that it strengthens that kind of visual connection and the circulation from one end of the library to the other, from collection space into that meeting/reading room.
Go ahead, Marianne.
So Matt, I have one question. How much space is there? What's the distance from the meeting room, that white space? So there's the two bathrooms,
this?
right? How big is that space?
Well, the bathrooms are about 7 by 8, roughly 7.5 by 8. So, this is maybe 8 by 10. It's about the same size as the vestibule. It's not very big, but it's also, this is a diagram, it's not a design. So if what you're getting at is you would like there to be more space, have it more open, I think that's achievable. If you think it's too much space, we could also tighten it up. But I think this is probably the minimum amount of space that you would want to be able to get a set of potentially double doors into the meeting room and have kind of ample room to get in and out of that room. Obviously, the door itself is going to be ultimately the limiting factor. But it could also be a door with a side light next to it, so you can see, there's a larger opening into the room visually, even though the doorway is narrower. So, that we could reorient the bathrooms so that they push over to the left. They rotate 90 degrees and go along that south wall, and that would open up that space. So I think, again, this is a diagram, and there's a lot of room for that kind of fine tuning. But I'm curious how you feel about the relationship of those two spaces, because they aren't right next to each other. And I think getting them, getting the meeting room to happen right next to the adult space is going to be difficult, and still allow for off hours access in a kind of clean and legible way.
Mhm.
So I guess, if I could have everything I wanted, I would want people to be able to spill out of the meeting room into a somewhat open space. So if there were too many people for the meeting room, they could spill out into the body of the library and still feel like they were participating in the program.
Okay.
So that, and it may be, but, and if you did, move the orientation of the two bathrooms, that would be, and this would be when, when the library was open, or somehow staff would make it available, but it seems like a little bit more space could be created there. And then that space, that sort of lobby, then participants could spill into that lobby and browsing space. If they, there could be mobile furniture there that could be moved to
Yeah.
accommodate overflow from a program.
Yeah, so if this blue meeting room square pushed up against the lobby, and the bathrooms were able to move someplace else, that would be closer to what you're describing. Okay, that's good feedback.
Could
Let
you
me
remind me
leave.
what BD stands for?
Oh, book drop.
Oh, okay.
And there are rooms that are missing from these diagrams too, partly because partly because we don't know the size requirements for those rooms yet, but things like, we're going to need a fire pump for this building because it's going to have a sprinkler system. There's no municipal water, so we're going to have underground water storage to feed the sprinkler system, which requires a fire pump. So that's got to be a dedicated 2-hour rated room. We don't know yet how big that room needs to be. We're also going to have a separate water service room, which is where the water service comes into the building. We're going to have an electrical service room. We think mechanical space, the hope is that we're able to accommodate mechanical equipment in attic space above some of the smaller rooms, offices and bathrooms, things like that. So we don't anticipate having to add mechanical space to these diagrams, but those 3 other spaces that I mentioned, we will have to add. Janitor's closet is another thing that doesn't show up here, but that's a very small component. One other thing while we're on this diagram, so I mentioned this is all under one roof, and we talked before about the role that solar is going to play on this project in terms of achieving net zero. So if we look at a couple of diagrams, section diagrams, and we take this scheme and we say, okay, this is a section through the building. We're looking west. South is on the left side of the page, north is on the right side of the page. These are 2 different roof diagrams. The top one obviously is a gable roof. The bottom one is a single slope roof. And just some things that I think are worth mentioning. In a gable roof, 50% of that roof is available for PV, right? Half of the roof faces south, half faces north. In addition to that, when it rains, half of the water that hits that roof is going to the south side of the building, half of it is going to the north side of the building. If we look at a single slope roof section, which is the bottom section, and we say, okay, it's going to be a roof that slopes entirely to the south. That means the entire roof area is available for solar. Now, that doesn't mean that we're doubling the amount of solar from a gable roof, because the roof area is less than the gable roof area. But it's still about a 33% increase in available real estate for solar. So we can achieve, we can have solar on 100% of the roof area, and we can achieve about 33% more solar production on this style roof than we can on a gable roof. In addition, all of the water that hits that roof is shedding to the south, which is in the site diagram, if you remember, we were up against or even pushing into a little bit the 100-foot buffer for the wetlands. So in this lower diagram, all of the rainwater from the roof is being diverted away from wetlands, which we think is a good thing. It would get collected then to the south of the building and infiltrate there, rather than having to figure out how to deal with it as it's shedding off the roof. Now, granted, roof runoff is a lot cleaner than parking lot runoff, but it's something that we want to consider. One other nice thing about the single slope roof is that, given this orientation facing north, we'll get good indirect light, good north indirect light, which means the building is bright. And on a lot of our library projects, we add daylight dimming systems so that when there's available natural light, we're able to reduce the amount of artificial light that's required. And so having, that ability to get indirect light that doesn't require special shading or anything, we see as a benefit. So I mention this not because we've made a decision one way or the other, but we see some compelling reasons why we might want to be considering the single slope roof. It's less complicated structurally, and it's less material, it's less roof area. So we think it would be less expensive in the end than a gable roof would be. And just to
Wait, Laura has her hand up. Let's let her.
Oh, sorry, Lauren.
It's okay.
You're muted, I think, Lauren.
You're still muted. You don't have a volume. You're unmuted, but you don't have volume.
Lauren, do you want to try and leave and come back in? Sometimes that resolves sound issues.
Okay, Stephen, we'll take your question then.
With the, we'll say the shed roof and the lower slope, doesn't that make the photovoltaic more effective also?
We haven't gotten into that level of discussion yet with our solar design consultant in terms of what the optimal angle is. I can tell you that we've installed solar on roofs that are as low as 1 in 12, and that's been productive. And in fact, we achieved net zero on a library that had a low pitch roof that was about 1 in 12. Is there an optimal angle? Probably, and we haven't had that conversation yet to know what it is. And I think we would try to strike a balance between what is that optimal angle and what's realistic in terms of, this building and the proportion of the spaces inside and the height of the rooms, all that. But that's something that we'll get into as we spend more time with our solar design consultant.
Lauren, are you back with a voice? Nope.
Wow.
No, I'm sorry.
Could I ask a question while you're waiting?
Who is this?
Mir-
No, I'm sorry. We're going to wait until the end of our committee. Marianne?
Can I ask a dumb question about snow? Matt,
Yeah.
I'll try and keep my dumb questions to a minimum. So, so I so appreciate how creative and thoughtful you are. That's not a question, but I just wanted to put that out there. So, so this flatter roof, what do we do? You know, so a pitched roof, the snow might get some sunshine on it and the snow would fall off. Are there things that people do to make the snow melt?
Not other than sunshine, typically,
Okay,
if you can avoid it. I mean, I don't think you want to be in a situation where you are having to put heat trace, on the roof, and that's a maintenance nightmare. You want a roof that's designed anticipating snow. And I would say, in terms of snow management for both of these, usually the strategy is hold the snow on the roof and let it melt, right? So you want snow rails or some type of retention so that the snow isn't sliding off the roof. Which is also kind of problematic when you have people walking around the building. So if you can hold the snow on the roof and let it melt slowly, that's the best thing. So snow rails is something that we have done on a number of our projects. With a steeper roof, the snow sliding off the roof is more of an issue. So you might need more retention than you would on a lower pitch roof, for instance. And if it's a metal roof, it's going to slide off more easily than if it's some other roof that has more grip, like an asphalt roof or something like that. So those are considerations too. But I think that we would take the same approach in terms of snow management, regardless of the shape of the roof. And these pitches also are diagrammatic. We don't know exactly what the pitch should or would be for a gable roof, and same is true for a shed roof. I will tell you that a couple of recent projects of ours, I think we've talked about this one with you. This is the Eastham Library. I bring this up for two reasons. One, this is a single slope roof. It's oriented south. The main roof here is oriented south. So we have that whole roof is supporting PV. And in fact, in the end, the town opted to put solar on this entire roof. And even though this is west facing, north is to the left on the page. You can see the north arrow here. Even though this is west facing, they actually get a reasonable amount of yield from that side of the building. And this is now net zero because they put solar on the entire roof. In fact, they even put PV on the roof of the meeting room, which is technically sloping towards the north, but it's low enough pitch that they're getting some yield from that. But I think as relevant to you is this is a project that had a wetland buffer. We're in this case, we were up against a deep kettle pond, and so watershed considerations and wetland buffers were a big consideration. And when we started this project, the parking lot for the building was here between the library and the old library and the pond. So we moved it to higher ground along the road, introduced collection, rain gardens to deal with stormwater management in the parking lot. And then for the building, again, we wanted to direct the rainwater away from the wetland buffer. And so the roofs were sloped inward to collect the water on the back side of the building. We have infiltration beds in the center reading garden, below grade that you can't see them, but water is all kind of collected and directed into the center, and it's infiltrated there before it then sort of recharges into the ground. And so I mention it because it's has some of the same kind of benefits that I'm talking about in the other section. Another similar project is the Norwell Library, more recently completed. This was completely surrounded by wetland. So this is a new 20,000 square foot building. This blue line here is the 100-foot buffer. The green line is the edge of the resource. So these are the various, 50, 75, and 100-foot setbacks. we were able to get most of the building out of the buffer entirely, but there were a couple of incursions into that 100 to 75 foot. And that was mitigated in other ways. You know, we added, we increased the amount of wetland area, you know, landscaped areas that sort of compensated for the disturbed areas in the buffers. And a similar approach, a single slope roof sloping down into a center, in this case, a center courtyard that also acted as a kind of rainwater collection, you know, retention and infiltration area. And so this building had wetland all around it, and it was really trying to get everything, sort of keep everything in the middle. The Eastham Library was more, you know, it was an edge condition. But those kinds of strategies are what we're talking about when we're looking at a building that's oriented like this, and we're thinking, you know, it'd be nice to get all the water off that roof and back here into the area outside the buffer, ideally. So that's kind of the starting point for where we're thinking. It doesn't mean that that's the only solution, but that's kind of how we think. So moving on to another, this is a slight variation of the previous diagram that you saw. And
Can I just ask, can you hear me now?
oh yes,
Yes,
now we can.
yes.
Okay. So actually, my original comment is much less relevant now, and it's something that we can talk about in future meetings. It's not that important. But one thing I do want to mention, since we're talking about sustainability strategies right now, is that our understanding from the Green Communities Division is that you need to get the Green Communities Division and your utilities involved in the design very early, like now, in order to qualify for the biggest incentives. The new revised stretch code is going into effect this July, and so it will impact this project, and you want to get into the most advantageous pathway for the greatest incentive. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thanks, Lauren. That's good. That's good to know. And yeah, we were aware of the July date for the stretch code. So this will be permitted after that goes into effect.
Lauren, just to comment on that, we've already reached out to, I think it's Eversource, right, for this community? And it's an open question. We've already reached out to those powers to initiate the conversation about pathways and incentives and whatnot.
Great, thank you, Neil.
So this diagram is really just a kind of variation of the one that we just saw, where again, kind of back to that idea that the meeting room, we're improving the legibility of the connection between the collection area and the meeting room. And Marianne, to your point earlier, I think if the meeting room pushed up to the lobby and we found a different way to handle bathrooms, this one is probably even a little stronger in terms of the connection between the two. It's a little bit more awkward in terms of the porch, but I think that's something that could be resolved. In this case, because the meeting room in the previous diagram, the porch was big enough that we were thinking this could, it's entry porch, but it could conceivably double as an extension of the meeting room to covered outdoor space. It's a little bit odd to have that outdoor spillover also be the main entry path into the building. There's a little bit of a conflict there. So a nice thing about this one is that we would push the roof out a little bit to the south. Because the meeting room has shifted north, we take advantage of a little bit of extra depth here. And with a small extension of the roof down at that end, we think we could get under that same roof, covered outdoor space and, maybe storage space for the, kayaks or whatever that's close to parking. And that would be under really just an extension of that same roof plane. and the same kind of structural system extending out, rather than a kind of standalone pavilion that's a separate thing. It's really part of the building. So from here, we started looking at a slightly different approach, which was just, and I think we talked about this maybe in our very first meeting, what would happen if this building was oriented north-south, and what would that do for us? Are there any advantages there? And so, one thing that we realized is we thought there's the potential that we could get the raised septic, the building, and parking all kind of in that area outside the buffer, although the relationship between septic and building still needs to be explored. I think the grade differential there poses some challenges. That if this is the area that we want accessible to kind of use as outdoor space, then the fact that it's raised up higher than the floor of the library presents a challenge. But maybe that means that you use the area that's already cleared meadow, and that becomes it's in front of the library, and that becomes usable outdoor space for you. But in terms of building planning, one of the things about orienting it this way, knowing that parking is probably going to be in this kind of eastern side of the property, is that there's an entry kind of close to parking. You come straight in, you can then make a decision. You either go left to go to the meeting room, or you go right to go into the main collection spaces. So the organization is not that much different, but entering from the side versus entering at the end and kind of working your way, sort of all the way along to the middle of the building. In this case, you're entering right into the middle. So there's a more immediate access of the building and the program inside. And it would work the same way. It would, close off alongside of the lobby and browsing area, so that the left side of the plan would be accessible off hours and the right side is secure. Children and adults under one roof. In this case, we were thinking maybe teens were kind of grouped in the middle here, and easy to get to, easy supervision. They'd be in an enclosed room, I think, based on some earlier conversations that we had. I think, Marianne, some of the same comments that you made earlier apply here in terms of the relationship of the meeting room to the lobby. And I think that could be studied and improved here. Like the scheme that we just looked at, this imagines that the roof, and again, this is, really just one big roof over this entire thing, that roof extends further south to cover outdoor program space. And it, budget depending, we can decide if that's realistic or not, but it's an easy way. It's not a separate structure. It's just a continuation of the same logic and the same roof plane. So there's a kind of efficiency there. And there's a good relationship then from, lobby to meeting room to outdoor program space.
But it really cuts down on our solar capacity, doesn't it?
Well, it doesn't necessarily. So we thought about that. And we initially, when we were thinking about this scheme, we thought, a gable roof oriented, and this came out of a conversation we had with our solar consultant, a gable roof oriented north-south with one half facing west, one half facing east, unlike in the earlier iteration you saw where the building was oriented with one side of the roof south and one side north. Only in that case, only the south side is going to really do much for you.
Mm-hmm.
Our solar consultant said that in this orientation, the west side and the east side would both cease and yield. It wouldn't be as efficient as, a roof that was facing south, but you would still get the potential to use solar on both sides. You'd get a lower percentage of energy. So we thought, okay, well, what if we took the same approach that we thought about in the other scheme, but in this case, we ran it the length of the building. So we're sloping from low at the outdoor program area up to high in the reading room. So hierarchically, in terms of the spaces, that also makes sense that you're moving from kind of lower space up to the higher spaces. So the biggest room is the tallest room in effect. We would have, mechanical spaces above things like the circ desk and the staff workroom and above the bathrooms. But the lobby could be open to structure above, the main reading room could be open to structure above, and the meeting room could be open to structure above. And then that same structural system extends out and creates this covered outdoor space, same structural logic. So in that case, then that entire roof is south-facing PV. So in terms of the real estate, it's the same as, this option when it was south-facing. There's really no difference in the solar potential there. So then it's really a question of, what do we think about this orientation as it relates to the site? And I think that's something that we're still studying. We haven't, I don't think we're not at a point where we're ready to make any kind of conclusions or recommendations. And frankly, we're not looking for you to make any decisions about anything tonight. We're just giving you a sort of update on our thinking, progress, and hoping to get some feedback from you to help sort of narrow our focus a little bit. So
Lauren
one
has
last
a question. Wait a minute, Lauren has a question.
I do want to say that I really do prefer the staff workroom adjacent to the circulation area. I think it can work the other way. I've worked in a library where it was not connected, and there are workarounds, but it's not ideal.
Okay.
But this made me think, what would be the advantages and disadvantages of a sawtooth roof in this orientation? You could have maybe 3. I just think that in that adult area, that's going to be a really tall space, and you're going to have to work hard to condition that space with such a high ceiling in there with this configuration.
Yeah, I'm not overly concerned about conditioning, and Lauren, we're imagining that space is probably in volume not unlike the adult reading room at Norwell, which
Yeah, and that's a
stratifies.
pretty tall ceiling.
It's a
I
tall
mean,
ceiling, but
yeah,
it stratifies, right? I can't do justice to the mechanical delivery for in that space, and I will have our mechanical engineer join one of these meetings because I think he can talk about it. But we had that conversation about that space, and they didn't have any concerns about inefficiencies in terms of heating and cooling, and sometimes that's overcome with destratification fans, just a ceiling fan that is moving air in the space.
or what about displacement rather than?
That's another possibility. I think in the case of Norwell, we were delivering the air at a kind of midpoint in terms of the height of the wall, so it was coming out of a slot vent that was about halfway up the side wall, and then we had perimeter heating as well for the glazed areas. But I'm not going to be able to do justice to the logic behind HVAC, but I hear your point, and it's something that we will address with our mechanical consultant. And frankly, that's going to be true for any of these, because given the scale of the building, we're going to want spaces that are reasonably tall, especially if we're looking at putting all of the collection spaces kind of in one big volume, like we saw that library out in Washington State that took that approach. And I think, for a space that big, it needs that kind of volume to feel substantial and feel like it's right sized for that kind of program. And so we're going to have that mechanical question no matter what scheme we go with. In terms of the sawtooth roof, I think a sawtooth roof would do the same thing in terms of allowing you to get kind of maximized south facing roof, but it's a lot more expensive to do it that way. I mean, we can certainly study it in this option and talk about it with our structural engineer. you know, a nice thing about the sawtooth roof is you get south-facing roof for PV and north-facing clear story windows for natural light. I don't think, given the narrowness of this building, though, I don't think that natural light is going to be an issue in this as it's diagrammed here. But that's something we can certainly continue to look at. And I think whichever approach we take, we're probably going to want to do a number of different kind of roof studies.
Matt, can you tell me how high are we talking about when you say the maximum at the adult roof level there? What are we talking about for height?
You're talking about down at this end?
Yes.
You know, I would say that's probably in the 15 to 18 foot range, something like that.
Okay.
You know, to the underside of structure. And that's about where, you know, if we go back and look at that, that's about the height of this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then it slopes down from there, and the low point is a function of the roof pitch and kind of the minimum height that we would want at this condition where you're moving underneath structure to get outside. And, you know, we'd want to keep that at a certain height. And I don't know yet what the minimum height should be down there, but you know, if we sort of pick those 2 points, and that establishes the slope of the roof.
Right. Right.
One other thing about a roof that is sloping away from the road, if we go back to this earlier diagram and we think about roof material, in the gable roof, half of that roof is visible to Leverett Road. In this case, none of the roof is visible from Leverett Road, and the same is true in this version. None of this roof is visible from Leverett, and so the material of that roof is not important, right? In the gable roof, if you said we're gonna save money and we're gonna do a TPO roof on this entire building, it would look terrible from Leverett Road. But on a building section like this one, or the other one that's entirely south facing, you could do a TPO roof, cover it entirely with photovoltaic, save money on roofing costs, and really never see it, even when you're on the south side of the building, because the pitch of the roof is so shallow. In fact, the Norwell roof is a TPO roof, and it's such a shallow pitch that you really can't see it even from the parking lot. You barely get a glimpse of the surface of the roof. So just something to mention. We have one last diagram, and that is, we thought, okay, what if we bent this bar, which did a couple of things for us. One, by virtue of having an L-shaped building, it starts to define outdoor space. And so you can imagine that the 2 wings of this building are sort of arms cradling this kind of outdoor activity space. And in this case, we pushed the septic further away so that there's space between the septic and the building, and there's a, you know, kind of smaller scaled outdoor precinct behind the library, which is very different in character potentially from what's on the Leverett Road side of the building, which is more expansive, open meadow. You know, the backside of the library is pushing up against the trees, and so you can imagine a very different character of landscape front and back, and that's true, you know, in some of the other diagrams as well. But the other thing that the L does for us, we thought, is that it provides a little bit of separation between parking, however that ends up getting resolved, and that outdoor space. I think that the previous diagram does that also. You know, if we think that outdoor space is going to be on the west side of the building, the parking is on the east side, the building is creating a buffer. But in some of these earlier diagrams where it's oriented north-south, or sorry, east-west, there, you know, parking would be here, and then there's outdoor space here, and there isn't as much separation there. So we have to maybe work a little bit harder to screen parking and not have the parking be, you know, to feel like too much of an imposition. So that was an aspect of this that we thought was kind of appealing. It also puts a porch, again, facing the kind of entry drive and parking. And so if we look at how that lays out, again, very similar in that it's, grouping the collection spaces together. In this case, we put the staff in the corner so that when you come in the front door, under this covered porch, through a vestibule and into the lobby, the circ desk and staff is right there. And so they have good supervision of this whole, open collections area. They have good supervision of the door. They have good sight lines straight through into the meeting room. And, that's a kind of strategic spot for them. The challenge with this is that it puts the staff in probably the most prominent corner of the building. And we didn't like that as much. And I don't know if you remember in some of the earlier diagrams we've shared with you, we had we had children here, we had staff in the middle, and then we had adults at the end. And we did that because we wanted, larger kind of public space on a prominent corner like that. So we think there might be ways around that. And if we could bring maybe some of the adult program to that corner, maybe the study room goes there. And so it's a public room on that corner that then maybe is even accessible off hours as a smaller meeting space if you needed it, or maybe this becomes a kind of special periodicals room or something. But we think that there's potentially a way to create some more public presence at that corner, still have the staff generally, in this corner and able to supervise everything pretty easily. This one also, I think, probably a disadvantage is that although the meeting room, there's a lot of kind of openness between the lobby and the meeting room, maybe more so than in some of the other schemes. It's further away from adults visually, not in terms of distance, but there's not that same kind of strength of visual connection between the two. And so, depending on how much that's a priority, I would say that's potentially a negative of a scheme like this. So just for comparison, these are all, roughly the same size. They're, as we get into drawing these in CAD and drawing wall thicknesses and furniture and shelving, we'll get more specific about square footages. So we don't have any square foot analysis, but these are all kind of in the range that we expected them to be. We think that with the grossing factor accounting for walls and some of the currently unidentified support spaces that I mentioned, electrical, water service, and pump room, these are all probably going to be in the 5,500 square foot range. Maybe we can be a little more efficient. They're pretty efficient buildings in that there isn't a lot of circulation. It's a lot of open spaces next to other open spaces, and there's some small rooms, but there isn't much in the way of corridors or the kind of typical circulation you might see in other buildings. So that's a good thing. It means that I think we can be more efficient in our net to gross ratios.
Brad has his hand up. Brad?
I like that last one, but I also wondered, does that just because it's angled, does it have a higher cost?
It might. I don't know off the top of my head. Neil, you might have a better intuitive sense of that. I mean, my suspicion is that it would be slightly more expensive because the foundation is, it's got some more jogs in the foundation, and you've got a valley beam, whereas you don't have that in the other roof options. And so maybe there's a slightly more complicated structure, but the structure of each wing is the same, but it's, turning the corner, there's probably a little bit of a premium. I couldn't quantify that. But yeah, I think there's probably a slight premium to that one because of that.
Am I also right that was more in the buffer?
It is, And the reason it was is we were trying to kind of figure out a way, could we get septic and the library to sort of share, you know, their imposition into that first 50 feet of buffer. And again, please do not take these as proposals. This is us just kind of thinking on paper. And in fact, I meant to mention earlier, and I didn't, but I will now. This corner of the site, which you can see, is outside of the buffer, and that's where the current looped entry drive is. One possibility is that we use that location for the firewater storage tank, which is a below grade tank, you know, something in the neighborhood of 20,000 gallons, 15,000 or 20,000 gallons. We'll have to do that calculation. But that would be easy to access for filling it. It's outside the buffer, and you would just pipe it to the building. But another possibility is that we look at the septic field in this location, and see if there's a way to get it to kind of nestle into that corner between the tree and the property lines. We'll have to look at what the setback requirements are there, but that would put it downslope from the library, which is good. We'd have gravity working for us instead of the potential to have to pump as much, you know, pumping uphill. So I think there's a potential advantage there. And it gets it, you know, close to the road and away from the wetlands instead of right kind of in the middle of this property. Anything we do is going to be a Title V septic, so it's going to be a, you know, a high performing septic system. But I wanted to mention that was a possibility. So Brad, to answer your question, yes, this one is pushing into the wetland buffer more. It's still staying out of the 50-foot buffer. And again, with the thought being that any roof runoff in a situation like this would be shedding away from the buffer and sort of depositing into the area outside the buffer.
Thank you.
Stephen, you had your hand up.
Yes, a couple things. In the sort of first two schemes and then the last scheme, I like those in the sense of, you know, the building's not that big and it's a good distance back from the road. And I think those buildings would have a better, say, road presence or possibility of a road presence than the second option, which, while it's not perpendicular to the road, it's, you know, more like that. And then, you know, with the plan so far, I mean, the nice thing about, you know, the open space is it allows the building to be very flexible. I mean, you know, over time, if you find, you know, you need more adult, you don't need as much children, it seems like that it would be easy to adjust. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, good points. Thanks.
Any more committee comments? So where do we go from here, Matt?
So let's look at the schedule. We now hopefully have a signed contract, and we're only a month into the design phases. So we're roughly a third of the way through the schematic design phase. Our next meeting, if we stick to the 2-week cadence, is the week of March 13th. I have actually a scheduling problem at the beginning of that week. I'm at a conference in Atlanta Monday and Tuesday, and so I can't do a Tuesday meeting. I could manage a Wednesday or Thursday meeting, or we could talk about pushing it to the Tuesday after this, which would be the 20th. But that's the next kind of bi-weekly meeting. I think what would be good to happen between now and then is to set up hopefully an informal conversation with conservation, you know, whether it's the chair of the commission or I don't know how that works. You guys can tell us what the best procedural way is. The way that we would imagine this conversation is that it's an informal discussion of the project so that we can kind of talk about the things that we've been thinking about and ask questions that we have and hear from the Conservation Commission what their priorities are and what they would or would not be willing to work with us on. You know, they may have a stronger opinion about some things than others, and we just don't know that until we have that first conversation with them. And so it would be great just to have an informal, it doesn't need to be, and in fact, probably I would think shouldn't be an official Conservation Commission meeting where, you know, there's no actionable item here. We're not presenting something that we're asking for them to, you know, approve or not. We just want to have a conversation so that we understand where we're all going as a sort of team here. We want to make sure that we are doing what is appropriate on this site, and you know, it's a site that has a lot of wetlands on it, and that's something that we take seriously. And so we want to make sure that we at this early stage are setting ourselves up for success and doing things that are proposing things that we think have the support of everybody in town. So
I think that's a great idea to have the committee meetings, and I was going to suggest that tonight, Miriam, Miriam is the chair of the Conservation Commission. She's here now. And my feeling was that we should have the entire committee here, and I would like to have both committees, even though, as you say, it wouldn't be a decision-making meeting, as long as they are a quorum at the meeting, it must be posted as one of their meetings. So I think it would be good to have them. It would be good to have possibly the Board of Health come and to also have the Select Board. So I'd like to propose that at least these 4 committees come together and start having an informal discussion. There won't be any decisions made at that time, but a very informal discussion. Miriam, I will let you speak now as to your opinion of this.
Thank you. And I'm Miriam DeFon. I'm the chair of the Conservation Commission. And I was invited to come tonight, so I was surprised that I couldn't participate in the discussion. I had some questions earlier in the discussion, but we can have those at some other point, I guess. I think that it will be cumbersome to try to convene a joint meetings with all of the Conservation Commission. We are only meeting once for a regular meeting in March. We have another special meeting scheduled for March, but then we don't meet again until April. I would like to propose instead that if we want to have some interim meetings, we could have them with a sub-quorum representation, perhaps me and Beth Wilson, who used to be the conservation agent for the town of Amherst and is a wetland scientist, and she's one of our commissioners. I think the 2 of us could represent the interests of the commission.
Okay.
I did have a couple of comments I wanted to make about the discussion. I don't know if that would be helpful at this stage or not.
Okay.
Just as you're discussing, and this is really for the architect. I don't see your name here, so I'm
Matt Oden.
Matt.
Matt.
Yeah.
As you're discussing these different layouts, there was a lot of conversation about buffer zones, and we're in the process of finalizing the ANRAD determination. But the consensus at the last public hearing is that there is an area in the wetlands that was unable to be delineated, which means that that buffer zone has yet to be finalized and would need to be finalized if there was going to be any work in that area. I'm not sure exactly if there would be some situations where we wouldn't require that with an NOI or not, but I think it's important to be mindful of the fact that that buffer zone is not settled in around the BVW3. I don't know if that was communicated to you or not.
No, I don't know about that area. Can you describe where that is on the site roughly?
Yeah, sure. So can you pull up a site plan? So why don't you show me one of the Yeah, so that's a good example. So you see that wetland that is just south of the relocated building?
Yes, the along the east side of the property.
It's actually
This
around
one?
the west side. So it's just, I'm sorry, it's just south of your orange rectangle, that
This-
long
This
linear
area.
wetland.
Yeah, okay.
If you think of that as a hand, the thumb, you see how there's kind of a stub to that thumb, there's kind of a flat line.
Yeah,
That line has fill that the commission has determined is unpermitted fill. And it's several feet thick, and the wetland scientists were unable to close that line without the use of heavy machinery. So by consensus with the applicant, we've agreed that we would approve the other wetland delineations, but that line between the 2 points is not been delineated. So it could be that is approximately where the end of that wetland is, or it could extend 50 feet. We just don't know. If it did extend, that could have a change on your buffer line.
mhm.
And so that would need to be determined if there was going to be any work activity that would require that. Our understanding was that there would be a notice of intent, and that if that was an issue, it would get resolved at that stage. The other thing I think, just as you're talking about solar projects, which is great, that, the town is thinking about making this as close to net zero as possible, but, you need to be factoring in vegetation removal for solar gain, particularly if you're thinking about being outside of a buffer zone. If you're thinking that you're going to have to remove vegetation to the south in a buffer zone, then that's going to be an impact you'll have to think about. And I would just say, we do permit projects within buffer zones. It's not like you can't. We would want to see, minimizing impacts as much as possible.
Mhm.
But certainly it is possible to propose something that might be partially in a buffer zone.
Okay, that's good to know. Miriam, can you tell me a little bit more about what the commission's feeling is about septic as it relates to buffers? And so the statement that you just made, that the commission would be willing to discuss incursions into the buffer zone, is that possible for, say, the septic field, the leaching field?
We do and have permitted septic systems in the buffer zone. And, it would really be based on an alternatives analysis,
Okay.
and whether there were other options,
Mhm.
Recognizing that there may not be other options. And so maybe looking at what the best approach is going to be. And, again, thinking about the buffer zone is a protected resource under our local bylaw. So we do treat the buffer zone as a protected resource.
Mhm.
The inner 50 feet under Title V is considered to be more significant than the outer 50 feet.
Right.
Typically a notice of intent is required for residential septic if it's in the first 50 feet. And the outer 50 feet would be a request for determination. But for a much larger commercial size septic, that's not really relevant. But I think, we'd have to take a look at what the evidence is around alternatives and what you're proposing.
Okay. And you mentioned clearing a minute ago. I assume the clearing in the buffer would be something that would be considered as long as there are sort of compensatory efforts made to offer up something in place of that clearing. Is that's been our,
I think mitigation. I think that,
Yeah.
What we would probably really like is some careful thought about a mitigation proposal.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. One thing, as we're talking, I'm also realizing, and we're talking about a potential meeting at some point. I think it's going to be very important for our civil engineer and our landscape architect to be part of that meeting. So we'll just want to make sure that when we schedule it, we're taking that into consideration. They I'm sure will have many more questions than we will for you, but as I said, our goal here is to do this project responsibly and with respect to the surrounding wetlands. And so we're going to do the best that we can to make this project fit on this property in a way that's minimally impactful.
Matt, you just said that you wouldn't be able to be available for our next meeting if it was on the 14th. No, is it on, what is it?
It would be
Yeah.
the 14th.
14th. The
Yes,
14th,
Tuesday
yeah,
the 14th is 2 weeks from today.
right.
And I am out of town the 13th and 14th at a conference, so I won't be back until late that evening. So I could do later that week, or we could, I don't know how difficult it is for people to meet on other days of the week, but we could also push it to the 21st.
Okay, I will, I'll pull the committee and see about getting another rework on either making it the 15th or the 16th or the 21st.
Okay.
So committee, keep that in mind. I will be asking you all for that. And also to try to get the 2 members of the Conservation Commission and the Select Board members and the Board of Health. See what we can do for that. Okay.
Right.
Any other comments from the committee? Robert, I see your hand is up. Do you have a short question, comment?
Yeah, it's short. First, transparency. I'm Miriam DeFont's husband. I'd like to compliment the engineer on proposing a variety of options to the committee. I think that's excellent to have different configurations to look at, because it really helps you zero in on what you really want. So question for Matt, compared to other sites you've worked with, how difficult a fit is this?
It's hard to say, honestly. We don't have an ORAD yet, for one, but I would say that it's comparable. It's probably more difficult than the project on the Cape that I mentioned in Eastham, but it's probably comparable to the one that we did in Norwell. I think Norwell as a town is 50% wetlands, so we were the odds were pretty good that we were going to get stuck with a tough site out there. That one, it's hard to say. It's early, but it's what we have going for us is it's a pretty big site and it's a small building. So we're hopeful that there's a relatively easy solution here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, have we exhausted this work with Neil right now? I see we are way over our usual amount of time, but that's okay. I don't mind that at all. Are there any last minute questions from the committee that they'd like to ask Matt? I don't see anyone raising their hand. All right, thank you, Matt, for this presentation. This is really helpful, gives us a lot to think about.
Elaine, may I ask just a quick question? It's more about process.
Certainly.
Will we have access, Matt, to your schematics? I'm the note taker here, and it was a very challenging task to try and look at what you were doing and write down something about what you said. And I'd love to be able to see your presentation.
Yes, I can share a PDF with, I don't know, Elaine and Marianne, the best way to do this. Should I just email to the 2 of you and let you distribute as appropriate?
You could,
PDF?
definitely,
Okay.
definitely.
Matt, can you just copy me on it as
Yeah,
well,
of
please?
course. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we will get in the habit of doing that actually after every meeting, so you have a record of the presentations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that, Penny. Okay. Lot 032, Mary Ann, what are we doing?
Well, actually, before that, so Matt and Neil have both brought up with me, sort of making a plan for, meetings going forward as we get more into the nitty-gritty of the design. And it really seems like the next meeting we should try and have that be an evening meeting, with Conservation and Board of Health and Select Board, like you said, in 2 weeks. But Matt asked if there was a way that we could have like a design subcommittee that would meet during the day. Matt, is that still something you're interested in?
Yeah, I mean, well, for 2 reasons. One, daytime meetings are easier for us. And it also means that it's more likely that we could have a number of those in person, whereas the evening meetings in person are a challenge for a 7 o'clock meeting in Shutesbury. But also just because it's, you know, these are big groups, and it's a lot to meet, you know, regularly with a big group. And so in the past, we've found that it streamlines things to meet with a small core group to talk about the kind of specifics of design, and then report on, say, a monthly basis, you know, once a month, or we can decide what's appropriate, to the full committee, and get, you know, the full committee's feedback at that point. And it's worked well for us on other projects, so we were thinking that might be a good option here as well.
And doing it that way, we could also, as a subcommittee, could report back to the full committee, and still have our biweekly meetings as the full committee, and then you could come to a monthly meeting.
Yeah.
Evening meeting.
Mhm.
Can I weigh in on that briefly?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
This is actually something I was going to ask Mary Ann tomorrow, because on most of our projects, there is a design subcommittee so that it becomes very unwieldy for the entire committee to make decisions on small design issues. And having a small, nimble subcommittee doing that work is really helpful and efficient. Thank you.
Okay. So, who would like to be on the subcommittee, the design subcommittee?
And I mean, I'm going to be on every committee.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah.
So I'm gonna put 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see, I had 1, 2, 3, 4. Is Dale, are you putting your hand up or not?
No, because I would like to be on this committee very much, but I am very unsure of my availability.
Okay.
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 And to be available, I don't want to, you know, take a spot away from anyone else, or sign up for something that I cannot be sure that I'll be able to be present at.
Okay, so it looks like there's 5 of us that would like to be on the committee, and 1 of us that has to be on the committee, and 1 of us that it doesn't want to be on the committee. So I am going to put names in the hat of all the people who want to be on the committee. And what should we pick? 4 total, which includes Mary Ann.
Can I say that I need to be on that committee?
Yes,
please?
yes. Well, yes, of course. I didn't even count. You're part of it. You're part of everything here. So Molly, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so I would like to be on the committee, but if it is meeting in person, then depending on when it's meeting would be dependent on whether I'd be able to participate. If it's like in the middle of my workday, then in Shutesbury, I can't do that. But if it's at one of the ends of the day, then I could, you know, probably manage.
Okay. Okay, so between Molly, Jeff, Stephen, Brad, and I, we will we'll get a group of us. Oh,
I
Brad,
wasn't-
you said no?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I thought you had put your hand up. I'm
no.
sorry. All right, so it's Stephen, Jeff, myself, and Molly. Penny, you did not have your hand up?
Well, I'm very interested. I don't want to take someone else's place, but my question is, do you want a record keeper?
I guess Penny's part of it.
Yep.
Yes.
These are not public meetings.
Oh.
And we
So you
don't need to
notes.
take minutes.
Don't need minutes? Okay.
No,
Okay,
subcommittee meetings are not public meetings. When you report back to the full committee, that is a public meeting, and no decisions are made at the subcommittee level.
Okay, but according to town meeting, if you have more than a quorum at the meeting, does that?
Oh,
affect
yeah.
this?
So I would say fewer than the number of building committee members than
Fewer than
constitutes a
half.
quorum.
so fewer than 4.
That's a challenge.
That is a challenge.
Good luck, Elaine.
Hmm.
Jill, can I ask you to weigh in on, Lauren, do you have the MCPPO, CPP, that thing, R2D2 certification?
I do not, no.
Neil, you have that, right?
Yes.
So can you weigh in on, I've heard different things about what constitutes a quorum and what has to be a public meeting. So are you our resident expert on that?
I don't want to contradict the information that Lauren provided, but it was my understanding that when a subcommittee is formed from a public committee, then the business of that subcommittee is subject to open meeting law. That's what I have always been told.
Yeah, I agree. And one of us will definitely be a note taker. And so the meetings will be, even if they are in person, we can always use the OWL and broadcast them on Zoom.
Well, we don't have to do that. If everybody participates in person, they do not have to be broadcast on Zoom. But that means that Lauren and Neil and Dominic and Matt would have to drive to Shutesbury, or we Shutesbury people would have to drive
No.
and
No.
meet somewhere in the middle.
No.
yeah.
We have to be, well, yeah, I don't
No,
think,
Pete, the public could be in the room.
right,
So we do not yet have a hybrid meeting mandate.
right.
Okay.
Right.
All
We
right, so
don't.
we can either be hybrid by choice, in person by choice, on Zoom by choice. So anyway, we can decide on the subcommittee and then post the meetings. I do suppose they have to be in Shutesbury if there are subcommittee meetings.
Yes,
And then we'll take minutes.
Can I just say one more thing about
Yes.
this? And I don't want to contradict Neil, but
Hey, Lauren, you write the checks. You can contradict me anytime you want.
there are no decisions made at the subcommittee level. There are discussions and there are recommendations that are made to the full building committee that is subject to open meeting law. And that is the way that I am concerned that this subcommittee is now getting to be unwieldy, and it will be very difficult to make any quick decisions.
Right.
In most of our projects, the design subcommittee is very small, very nimble. They talk about things and they bring things to the building committee and make recommendations. And That's
Okay.
how most projects work.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest that the subcommittee be Mary Ann, Jeff, and Stephen, and you are going to have to take minutes and be careful about that and bring information back to the full committee. Is that amenable to everyone? Please just raise your hand if it's amenable.
Oh,
Was that Penny?
it was.
You don't have to raise your hand. Can you say yes or no?
Just raised my hand.
Okay.
Although, yeah. No, that's fine.
Okay. Brad?
I just wanted to, I think this is very important. I think it's very important that it be a small committee just because it's going to function better as a small committee. And which is why I didn't put I'm very interested, but I didn't put my name forth because I feel like we need to keep it at a reasonable size. So I really like where you're going. Thank you.
And that doesn't mean that we can't come and listen.
Yeah. Well,
Yes. No, doesn't mean we can't come and listen. We can't participate, but we can listen.
And then we should pick a day of the week and I can just post the meetings. And ahead of time. So that they're always posted. And the agenda will always be library design, right? So, and so that's easy enough. And then, I think we can make this work.
Okay.
And so we'll have to, so Stephen and Jeff and I and Matt and Lauren and Neil and Dominic will have to come up with a day of the week that works for everybody and a schedule.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Penny, do you had something?
Oh, no, I just forgot to lower my hand. Sorry, I'm busy typing away.
No problem. Brad?
so if the committee is 3 members below a quorum, does it need to be posted? I thought that was one of the,
So what I'm going to do my own research and I'm going to talk to our town clerk and find out which state agency it is that I need to call. Just because I really appreciate the value of a small committee meeting that's nimble and can sort of meet at whim. And I also really appreciate the public process that open meeting laws dictate. And, I think it's good for transparency. No, I think, so somebody said to me that that the library has the most democratic website they've ever seen. And I would like for this to continue to be the most democratic process possible. So I'm going to do that research, and as long as the state agency in charge agrees, we can move forward without open meetings. And if the state agency in charge doesn't agree, then we'll just post them and do the best we can.
Can I just make it clear that I am not trying to be opaque?
Oh,
I
no,
am
not at all.
Trying
No.
to subvert any democratic
No.
process. I am trying to avoid lengthy delays in making decisions because we were supposed to be here 6 months ago.
Right.
And so you get my point.
Absolutely. And nobody,
Get
no, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just going to do my due diligence to make sure that I am really comfortable and doing what I know is right. So that
Okay.
nobody can accuse me of doing anything.
Okay. All right, so I will leave it to you folks to figure that out. Lot 032 update, please.
Lot 032. So just before this meeting, Matt Cassane and Tim Clinton from Fuss and O'Neill gave a presentation about the release at the Air Force Tower. I found it to be very, well, I've talked to them so much and have been sort of instrumental in making all of the testing happen. So they didn't say anything that I hadn't already heard several times, but they gave a very clear presentation. They described a small, localized, historic release of gasoline at the site of the former radio tower. It is, so if you picture Lot 032 and where the tree line is, it's 1,000 feet from there, back further south in the woods. It was a former Department of Defense site. The Department of Defense has already accepted responsibility for the site because they have already done remediation work there when they removed the underground storage tank and removed 100 tons of contaminated soil. So the town will be involved in communications with DEP and DOD about that. But the question was asked during their presentation a couple of times if it had any implications on the construction of a library, and they were very clear that it doesn't. So the town, so that work will be ongoing, and the town will be involved in it. It was a very clear presentation, and the slides will be posted online, and that recording will be available for anybody who missed it. And then the ANRAD hearing is March 9th at 8 p.m. And then the town is also in conversations with that little one line that Miriam mentioned about working with the conservation on that line. So Lot 032 is good. It's buried in snow. It's very pretty. So.
Thank you. So I think we're not planning for an upcoming forum as of yet. I will keep that on our radar because it's getting closer, but it's not there yet. But I will try to get that meeting with the select board, the members of the Concom, members of the Board of Health, and us on the on record. And I also will change our next meeting to accommodate Matt. Is there any other unanticipated business? I don't hear any. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn. It's Brad.
Thank you, Brad.
Do I hear a second, Jeff?
I second.
Any other comments? Okay, roll call vote. All those in favor. Marianne?
Antonellis, aye.
Stephen?
Almus, aye.
Brad?
Foster, aye.
Dale?
Cool, aye.
Penny?
Aye.
Molly?
Moss, I.
Jeff?
Quackenbush, aye.
Paleo, aye. Thank you all. This was a long meeting. I appreciate you staying with it. Robert, I will tell you that we only take public comment at the beginning of the meeting or during specific question time, and this was not one of them. So if you have a question, please send it to us at the Library Building Committee's email address, and I will make sure I answer it for you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good
Thanks,
night.
thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Pat. Enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Stephen.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Night.